Did you notice how things suddenly stopped feeling uncertain and instead felt settled? This message didn't arrive by accident. It found you because a decision point has been reached, and what was waiting on confirmation no longer is. In the next moments, you'll understand why preparation now feels quiet, why waiting is over, and why this phase cannot reverse. When something is truly final, it rarely arrives with shock. Sudden moments feel dramatic because they interrupt motion. Final moments feel different because the motion already slowed long before you noticed. This phase didn't appear overnight. It formed quietly while you were still questioning, adjusting, and learning. That's why it doesn't feel explosive. It feels settled. Think about how decisions actually lock in. The loud part happens earlier, the confusion, the pressure, the emotional swings. Finality shows up after all of that has already done its job. By the time you reach this point, the mind has caught up, resistance has softened, and the nervous system isn't bracing anymore. That calm is not emptiness, it's completion. Many people expect endings to feel intense, but real closure feels ordinary. You wake up one day and realize you're no longer pulled in two directions. You're not replaying conversations. You're not asking, what if, the same way. The urge to intervene fades because there's nothing left to fix. That's how you know it's final. There's no inner argument left. This is also why final phases don't announce themselves. If they did, they would trigger panic or control. Instead, they arrive once you've proven, without realizing it, that you can handle stability. You're no longer reacting to every signal. You're observing life instead of wrestling with it. That shift doesn't happen suddenly. It's earned through repetition, patience, and quiet endurance. Final doesn't mean everything changes instantly on the outside. It means the inside has stopped negotiating. Outcomes begin to move on their own because the internal alignment is already complete. You're not pushing anymore, and you're not pulling back either. You're standing in a place where movement can finally happen without interference. That's the truth about final. It isn't loud, it isn't rushed. It's calm, grounded, and unmistakably stable. And once you recognize that feeling, you realize there was nothing sudden about it at all. There comes a point when life stops asking for tweaks, corrections, or constant reevaluation. You can feel it when the urge to fix things quietly disappears, not because everything is perfect, but because nothing requires your interference anymore. That's the moment adjustment ends. The path doesn't need your hands on the wheel, it's already set. Before this phase, signs tend to feel confusing. You interpret, reinterpret, and second-guess them. But once adjustment ends, signs repeat instead of changing. The same themes show up in different forms, confirming direction rather than offering options. It's no longer about choosing, it's about recognizing that the choice has already been made. You might notice that you're no longer asking for clarity the way you used to. Questions like "should I?" or "what if I'm wrong?" lose their urgency. Even doubt feels different, less persuasive, more distant. This isn't confidence driven by excitement, it's certainty rooted in consistency. Things keep pointing the same way without effort. Another clear signal is timing. You stop trying to force speed or slow things down. You're not watching the clock or waiting for the right moment. Actions feel naturally paced. Delays don't frustrate you, and movement doesn't surprise you. That balance only appears when the adjustment phase is complete. This stage can feel almost anticlimactic, which confuses people who expect fireworks. But this quiet is exactly what allows outcomes to unfold cleanly. When you stop adjusting, you stop interfering. And when interference ends, what's meant to move forward finally has the space to do so, without resistance, without correction, and without reversal. Tests are loud. They provoke reactions, push buttons, and force decisions under pressure. If you're noticing that life feels quieter now, that's not a pause before another challenge. It's a signal that testing has ended. Tests exist to measure response. Once the response is consistent, the test serves no purpose. Earlier phases likely felt repetitive. Similar situations kept appearing, just dressed differently. That wasn't punishment, it was refinement. Each cycle checked whether your reactions were changing, whether your boundaries were holding, whether your sense of self stayed intact. Over time, you stopped reacting the old way. When that happens, the test dissolves on its own. You may notice that situations that once triggered anxiety or urgency now barely register. People might behave the same way they always did, yet it doesn't pull you in. That's not indifference, it's mastery. When something no longer controls your emotional state, it no longer has power over your direction. Another sign testing has ended is the absence of pressure. There's no feeling of being watched, judged, or evaluated. Decisions don't feel heavy anymore. You're not afraid of making the wrong move because you're no longer being graded on outcomes. The lesson already landed. Silence often replaces struggle at this stage. That silence can feel unfamiliar, even unsettling, if you're used to constant challenges. But it's not emptiness, it's space. Space appears only after effort is no longer required. When tests end, life shifts from proving to allowing. You don't need to demonstrate strength, patience, or worth anymore. You already did, consistently, quietly, and without applause. What comes next isn't another challenge, it's the result. When external movement slows, many people assume nothing is happening. In reality, this is often the most important phase, the internal preparation phase. It's the period where life stops asking you to act and starts asking you to align. That's why pushing right now feels wrong. The work isn't outward anymore. You may notice a shift in focus from goals to identity. Instead of thinking about what you need to do next, you're more aware of who you're becoming. Old labels don't fit the same way. Certain ambitions lose their charge, not because they failed, but because they were designed for a previous version of you. This recalibration happens quietly and can't be rushed. Internal preparation also shows up as restraint. You feel less compelled to explain yourself, prove your intentions, or announce your plans. Not because you're hiding, but because clarity doesn't need an audience. Your decisions feel more personal and less performative. That's a sign you're preparing to move from validation to embodiment. Another aspect of this phase is the release of urgency. You still care, but you're no longer driven by fear of missing out or falling behind. Timing feels cooperative instead of competitive. When that happens, it means your inner state is catching up with the outcome that's already forming. This phase can feel strangely simple. No dramatic rituals, no drastic moves, just awareness settling into place, and that simplicity is intentional. External success requires internal stability to sustain it. What you're preparing now isn't an event, it's a baseline. Once this phase completes, action will return naturally, not forced, not anxious, and not rushed. Until then, preparation looks like stillness, and stillness is doing far more than it seems. One of the clearest signals that you've entered a final phase is emotional neutrality. This doesn't mean you've stopped caring or that passion is gone. It means your emotions are no longer swinging in extremes. You're steady, you can feel things without being pulled by them, and that balance didn't come by accident. Earlier stages often bring intensity, hope, fear, excitement, disappointment, all cycling quickly. Those emotions serve a purpose. They keep you engaged while lessons are still forming, but once understanding settles in, emotional charge fades. What replaces it isn't emptiness, it's clarity. You're no longer reacting from anticipation or dread. You might notice that good news doesn't overwhelm you and delays don't upset you the way they used to. That's because your sense of direction isn't tied to immediate outcomes anymore. You trust the process because you've already seen enough consistency to know where things are headed. This neutrality also protects your energy. When emotions stabilize, you stop leaking attention into things that don't matter. You listen more, speak less, and choose responses instead of reactions. That calm presence often feels unfamiliar at first, especially if you're used to emotional highs being mistaken for progress. Importantly, emotional neutrality doesn't block joy, it refines it. Joy becomes quieter, more grounded, and less dependent on external validation. You appreciate moments without clinging to them. That's a sign of alignment, not detachment. When emotions level out, it's because the inner conflict has resolved. There's no internal debate demanding intensity, and when that debate ends, life can move forward smoothly without turbulence. As things settle internally, relationships begin to adjust without confrontation. You may notice certain people becoming less present, conversations shortening, or connections drifting without conflict. This isn't loss, it's alignment correcting itself. When growth completes a phase, not everyone is meant to continue into the next one. What's important here is that nothing dramatic is required. There's no need for explanations, arguments, or emotional closure. The connection simply stops fitting the frequency you're operating from now. Effort feels one-sided, and instead of forcing it, you allow the space to exist. That's maturity, not avoidance. Earlier, these relationships may have felt necessary, even if they were draining. They served a purpose during learning stages, offering contrast, challenge, or reflection. Once those lessons integrate, the dynamic naturally dissolves. You don't resent them, and you don't chase them. You just recognize the shift. You may also notice that you're no longer triggered by the distance. There's no urge to fix, reconnect, or prove anything. That emotional neutrality is key. When someone fades and it doesn't disturb your inner balance, it means the connection had already completed its role. This process can feel strange because we're taught that endings must be explained. But alignment doesn't need conversation. Energy organizes itself more efficiently than words ever could. When people fade out naturally, it creates room, not always immediately for new connections, but for clarity, peace, and authenticity. The absence isn't empty, it's precise. And that precision ensures that what remains in your life now truly belongs there. One of the strongest indicators that you've reached a final phase is the sudden absence of familiar loops. Situations that once repeated themselves, emotionally, mentally, or relationally, simply stop showing up, not because you force change, but because the pattern no longer finds a place to attach. Repetition exists to teach recognition. As long as a lesson is unresolved, life presents it in new forms. Different people, different settings, same emotional response. When you no longer react the same way, the pattern loses its purpose. There's nothing left for it to correct or reinforce. You might notice that old triggers don't activate you anymore. Things that once caused frustration, doubt, or overthinking now pass without engagement. It's not that you've become numb, it's that your nervous system no longer sees those signals as relevant. The internal response has updated. Another sign is how quickly you move on. There's no lingering analysis, no replaying conversations, no need to assign meaning. Events feel complete as soon as they happen. That immediacy of closure only appears when a cycle has fully ended. This phase can feel unfamiliar because repetition once gave structure, even if it was uncomfortable. Without it, there's more space, and space can feel quiet at first. But that quiet isn't uncertainty, it's freedom from rehearsal. When cycles end, life stops circling the same ground. Forward motion becomes possible not because you pushed harder, but because there's no longer anything pulling you back. There's a noticeable shift when a decision is no longer forming but finalized. You don't feel excitement or tension around it anymore, you feel settled. The outcome doesn't need defending, justifying, or rethinking. It sits there, steady, like something already agreed upon internally. At this stage, doubt may still appear, but it doesn't carry weight. It feels more like background noise than a real influence. You recognize it without engaging. That's because the decision energy is no longer fluid. It has structure. It isn't waiting on more information or emotional confirmation. You might also notice that you're no longer asking others for opinions the way you used to. External input doesn't sway you, not because you're closed off, but because your internal compass is stable. You can listen without absorbing. That's a clear sign that the direction is fixed. Another indicator is effortlessness. You're not trying to convince yourself or anyone else that this is right. There's no inner pep talk required. Action, when it happens, feels natural and unforced, as if it's simply following a script already written. This locked-in state often arrives quietly. No announcement, no dramatic declaration, just a sense that there's nothing more to decide. And when decisions stop consuming energy, that energy becomes available for movement, clarity, and presence. Once decision energy locks in, Reversal becomes unlikely, not because of stubbornness, but because alignment has removed the need to reconsider. Hopping feels active. It reaches forward, waits for signs, and asks for reassurance. Knowing feels different. It's quiet, grounded, and no longer in a hurry. When you move from hopping to knowing, the emotional tone of your thoughts changes. You're not asking for confirmation anymore, you're operating from it. This shift often surprises people because it doesn't come with excitement. There's no rush of anticipation or emotional high. Instead, there's a calm expectation. You assume things will unfold a certain way, not because you're forcing belief, but because everything internally has already aligned with that outcome. You might notice your language change. Instead of saying "I wish" or "I hope," you think in terms of when rather than if. Plans feel natural, not speculative. Even setbacks don't shake this sense of direction. They feel like timing adjustments, not threats. Knowing also changes how you wait. Waiting no longer feels heavy or frustrating. It becomes neutral. Time passes without urgency because you're not measuring every moment against an outcome. You trust movement to happen without monitoring it. This is a powerful place to stand because it doesn't rely on constant emotional input. You don't need signs, signals, or validation to maintain certainty. It's already built in. When hope transforms into knowing, effort relaxes. You're no longer leaning toward the future, you're standing in it mentally, and from that position, results arrive with far less resistance. There's a clear difference between being prepared and being tense. Anxiety tries to control timing. Preparation allows timing to work. In this phase, you may notice that you're still attentive, but you're no longer restless. You're ready without being on edge, and that balance is intentional. Earlier stages often created pressure to act quickly, fix things, or stay alert for every signal. Now that pressure has lifted. You're not scanning for threats or opportunities. You're simply present. That doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means your nervous system trusts what's unfolding. Preparation without anxiety shows up in small ways. You take care of practical details without obsessing. You make space in your schedule, your mind, or your environment, not because you're afraid of missing something, but because it feels appropriate. There's no panic behind the action. You might also notice that rushing feels uncomfortable now. Even when others push for speed, you instinctively slow down. That's not hesitation, it's alignment. Moving too fast would disrupt a process that's already balanced. This stage teaches patience without effort. You're not waiting with expectation or fear. You're simply available, and availability is different from anticipation. When preparation is calm, outcomes tend to arrive smoothly. There's less friction because you're not forcing readiness. You're already in a state that can receive what's next without shock, stress, or resistance. A noticeable change at this stage is how little things provoke you. Situations that once demanded an emotional response now pass without pulling you in. This isn't withdrawal or indifference, it's regulation. Your reactions have slowed because your inner state is no longer unstable. Reactivity usually comes from uncertainty. When you're unsure of direction or outcome, every comment, delay, or obstacle feels personal. But once clarity settles, there's nothing to defend. You don't feel the need to explain yourself, correct others, or jump into every situation. You observe first, and often that's enough. You may also notice that conflict feels unnecessary, not because you avoid it, but because it doesn't offer value anymore. Arguments lose their appeal when you're no longer trying to change minds or prove points. Your energy is reserved for what actually moves you forward. This reduced reactivity creates space for better judgment. You respond instead of react. Decisions come from awareness rather than impulse. Even when something goes wrong, you recover faster because your emotional baseline is stable. People often mistake calm for passivity, but it's the opposite. Calm allows precision. You choose when to engage and when to step back instead of being pulled by emotion. When reactivity fades, control returns. Not control over others or outcomes, but control over yourself. And that self-control is what allows the next phase to unfold without disruption. One of the most confusing parts of a final phase is how normal everything feels. There's no dramatic shift in daily life, no sudden announcement from the outside world. You still wake up, follow routines, and move through ordinary moments. Yet underneath that surface, something permanent has settled. People often expect major transitions to feel intense or obvious. In reality, intensity usually belongs to the build-up, not the conclusion. When things finally lock into place, the nervous system relaxes. That relaxation makes life feel simpler, not bigger, and that simplicity can be mistaken for stagnation. You may notice that you're no longer waiting for a clear sign that something has changed. The need for proof fades because the internal sense of completion is already there. You're not checking constantly to see if it's working. You're living as if it already has. This ordinariness is actually a sign of stability. Big changes that last don't disrupt your ability to function, they integrate into it. You adjust without effort. New perspectives become default without requiring conscious thought. Final phases don't announce themselves with excitement because excitement would create attachment. Instead, they blend into your life naturally. What's changed doesn't demand attention, it simply becomes how things are. That's how you know it's real. When transformation no longer needs to be felt to be trusted, it has truly settled. After a phase truly ends, there is often a period of quiet stabilization. Nothing dramatic rushes in right away, and that can feel confusing if you expect instant results. This pause isn't a delay, it's integration. It's the moment where life adjusts to a new baseline without disruption. You may notice that things begin to organize themselves with less effort. Situations resolve without long discussions. Decisions come together smoothly. You're not chasing outcomes, they approach you naturally. This is what happens when resistance is no longer part of the equation. Another change is how little you feel the need to explain your progress. You're not trying to convince anyone that something worked or changed. Your confidence doesn't come from external validation, it comes from internal coherence. You feel consistent, not reactive. This phase also brings a sense of continuity. Instead of waiting for the next big thing, you focus on maintaining balance. Growth becomes steady rather than urgent. You're building on stability instead of escaping discomfort. Importantly, what unfolds now tends to last. Because it's built on alignment rather than pressure, it doesn't require constant management. You're not holding things together, they're holding themselves. After final, life doesn't reset. It continues, but with less friction. You move forward from confirmation, not uncertainty, and that makes all the difference. At this stage, the biggest mistake isn't action, it's interference. When something has reached completion, trying to re-examine it only reopens what has already closed. The urge to double-check, seek reassurance, or test outcomes can quietly disrupt a process that no longer needs input. You might feel tempted to revisit old conversations, explain yourself, or look for signs that confirm what you already know. That impulse usually comes from habit, not intuition. In earlier phases, reflection was necessary. Now it creates noise. Clarity doesn't need repetition. Another thing to avoid is comparing timelines. Watching how fast or slow things appear for others can pull you out of alignment. Your path is no longer in the adjustment stage, so comparison serves no purpose. What's locked in will arrive at its own pace, without competition. It's also important not to rush closure. Even positive outcomes need space to settle. Forcing momentum can create unnecessary stress or missteps. Stillness now protects what's forming. The most powerful choice is restraint. Let finality remain final. Trust that what has concluded doesn't require maintenance, defense, or explanation. When you stop revisiting what's done, you allow what's next to arrive cleanly. And that's how you honor the work you've already completed, by not undoing it through doubt. What confirms everything isn't a dramatic event, it's how natural your current position feels. You're not bracing for impact, you're not preparing defenses, you're simply present, aware, and steady. That steadiness is the confirmation most people overlook because they expect proof to arrive loudly. You may notice that you're no longer asking, "Is this right?" The question doesn't arise because your inner state already agrees with the direction. There's no tension between where you are and where you're going. That internal agreement is rare, and it only forms when a chapter has truly closed. This quiet confirmation also shows up as trust without effort. You're not convincing yourself to believe. You're not managing fear. You're just allowing time to do what it does best, reveal what's already in motion. Even uncertainty feels less threatening because it no longer challenges your foundation. Nothing here requires announcement or validation. The work has already been done internally, and that's why results can now appear without resistance. You're not standing at the edge anymore. You're already across it, even if the view hasn't fully changed yet. This is how final phases end, not with noise, but with certainty that doesn't need to speak. What changes most after everything becomes final is how little effort it takes to move forward. You're no longer trying to make things happen or prove that you're ready. Action feels lighter because it's no longer fueled by pressure. You're responding to life instead of pushing against it. Living from certainty doesn't mean you know every detail of what's coming. It means you trust your position enough to stop overmanaging the process. You make decisions without second-guessing, and even when you pause, it doesn't feel like stagnation. It feels intentional. You may notice that your standards quietly rise. You tolerate less confusion, less chaos, and less emotional noise, not out of judgment, but because those things no longer match how grounded you feel. Your choices become simpler because clarity removes excess. This phase also brings consistency. Your mood, focus, and direction don't fluctuate wildly. You show up the same way on ordinary days as you would on important ones. That reliability is what allows progress to compound over time. Most importantly, you stop measuring your life by effort. You don't ask how hard something should be, you ask whether it aligns. And when it does, movement happens without strain. This is what it means to prepare yourself for what's final, not by doing more, but by standing firmly where you already are. One subtle but powerful change is how time feels now. You're still aware that things are unfolding, but you're no longer counting days or mentally checking progress. Waiting doesn't feel heavy because you're not placing your life on pause in anticipation of something else. You're living while things align. Earlier, waiting may have felt uncomfortable, like standing still while everything else moved. That discomfort came from uncertainty. Now the uncertainty is gone, so waiting loses its edge. Time passes without tension. You're engaged with the present instead of leaning toward the future. You may also notice that impatience fades, not because you stopped caring, but because urgency no longer makes sense. You understand that what's meant to arrive isn't delayed, it's simply arriving at its natural point of entry. That understanding creates ease. This shift allows you to enjoy ordinary moments again. You're not distracted by constant expectation or frustration. Your attention returns to what's in front of you, and that presence strengthens your foundation. When waiting no longer feels like waiting, it's because you're no longer dependent on an outcome to feel complete. You're already standing in alignment. And from that place, timing becomes a partner rather than an obstacle. One of the clearest signs that everything has settled is the quiet return of self-trust. Not the loud kind that needs confidence speeches, but the natural kind that guides decisions without hesitation. You listen to yourself again, and that voice feels steady, not reactive. You may notice you no longer ask others to confirm what you already sense. Advice becomes optional, not necessary. You can hear different perspectives without losing your own. That's because your inner reference point has stabilized. You trust your timing, your instincts, and your boundaries without needing proof. This self-trust also changes how you handle uncertainty. Instead of panicking or rushing to fill gaps, you allow space. You know from experience now that clarity arrives when it's needed. That knowledge isn't hopeful, it's earned. You move differently when self-trust returns. You say no without guilt. You pause without fear. You act without over-explaining. None of it feels dramatic. It feels clean. What's important is that this trust didn't come from getting everything right. It came from surviving uncertainty and staying aligned anyway. And once that trust is restored, very little can shake you. At this point, preparation is complete, not because everything is visible, but because you trust yourself enough to meet whatever appears next. What once felt unfamiliar now feels natural. Stability is no longer something you're reaching for, it's something you're standing in. Your days feel more consistent, your thoughts clearer, and your reactions measured. There's less inner noise because there's less inner conflict. You may notice that you're no longer questioning your position or scanning for what might go wrong, not because you're unaware, but because you're grounded. Even when challenges appear, they don't shake your foundation. You handle them without losing your center. This stability doesn't mean life becomes dull. It means it becomes reliable. You trust yourself to respond well, regardless of circumstances. That reliability creates confidence without arrogance and calm without detachment. Another shift is how you plan. You think long-term without fear. You don't rush decisions, and you don't avoid them either. Everything feels appropriately paced, as if your internal timing finally matches external movement. Stability as a baseline allows growth to be sustainable. You're no longer rebuilding after every emotional wave. You're building forward, layer by layer, without collapse. When stability becomes normal, you realize something important. This was never about reaching a peak. It was about creating a foundation strong enough to stand on permanently. And now, that foundation is in place. The final position doesn't feel like victory or relief. It feels like arrival. There's no urge to announce it, defend it, or question it. You simply recognize where you stand, and that recognition brings a sense of completeness that doesn't depend on external proof. At this point, you're no longer transitioning. You've crossed over mentally, emotionally, and energetically. Life may still unfold step by step, but your position within it is fixed. You're not searching for confirmation because you are the confirmation. What changes most is your relationship with the future. You're not chasing it or fearing it. You meet it from a place of steadiness. Plans feel flexible, not fragile. Adjustments don't threaten your direction because the core is secure. You also stop identifying with struggle. Challenges may still appear, but they don't define you. They're events, not identities. You handle them without losing perspective. This is what final truly means. Not an ending, but a settled state. A position you no longer need to lave, fix, or improve to move forward. From here, life continues, but it continues from certainty. And once you stand there, there's no need to go back. As we come to the close of this message, take a moment to notice how steady you feel right now. That steadiness is the clearest sign that you've reached the place this journey was getting you toward. Nothing here needed force, and nothing required urgency. You didn't miss your moment, you arrived exactly when you were meant to. What's final now isn't a door closing, but a foundation forming, one strong enough to carry you forward with confidence. This is what preparation truly looks like. Not stress, not overthinking, not constant effort, but clarity, self-trust, and calm readiness. Whatever unfolds next will meet you where you already stand, not where you used to be, and that's something to feel proud of. If this message resonated with you, let it be a reminder that your path is unfolding with purpose. You're not behind, and you're not uncertain, you're aligned. This is Chosen Realms, a space for clarity, growth, and inner strength. If this video supported you, please like it, share it with someone who may need to hear it, and subscribe to stay connected. And I'd love to hear from you. Comment below with what this final phase means to you or what you're preparing to step into next.